Good evening everyone. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 26 November 2025 and today we have a list of topics for our discussion. So the first topic is Assam state government has introduced anti-polygamy bill, and we'll understand what is this anti-polygamy bill and what are the important provisions. And the second important topic is Trump's Ukraine peace plan. So we'll also be discussing about this in detail, and drafts seeds bill that the Union Agriculture Ministry has put it for the public comments. So we'll also be discussing about the provisions of draft seeds bill. And then we also have the custodial torture and CCTV compliance of the Supreme Court's earlier orders with respect to prohibition or preventing any custodial torture or custodial deaths. So let's understand these topics in detail. Now the first very important topic, so before actually discussing about that, yesterday I have given one practice question for the prelims examination, and that is based on the a news topic which talks about the National Tiger Conservation Authority. So let's go through this question. So consider the following statements regarding the National Tiger Conservation Authority. Now in fact the first statement says that it is a statutory body established under the Wildlife Protection Act. So this statement is true because National Tiger Conservation Authority is actually a statutory body and it has been established through the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Now the second statement says that the Prime Minister of India is the chairperson of National Tiger Conservation Authority. Now in fact this statement is incorrect. Why? Because not Prime Minister but Union Environment Minister is the chairperson of National Tiger Conservation Authority. So therefore this statement is also incorrect. Now the next statement says that National Tiger Conservation Authority approves tiger conservation plans prepared by states. Of course, states prepare tiger conservation plans, and those tiger conservation plans are approved by the National Tiger Conservation Authority. So therefore statement number 1 and statement number 3 are correct, and the correct answer for this question A, 1 and 3. Right, so let's go and discuss all the topics which are important. So first is Assam anti-polygamy bill. Now what exactly is polygamy? So polygamy is a person marrying more than once, which is known as polygamy. Right, so a person marrying twice is known as bigamy. So more than twice is known as polygamy. Right, so this has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view this is very important for General Studies paper 2. So let's understand about this. Assam has brought a bill which criminalizes polygamy. Now let's understand the reason behind this and what are the exceptions which are provided under this Assam anti-polygamy bill. Right, so we all knew that Assam state government has introduced Assam Prohibition of Polygamy Bill 2025, so which prohibits practice of polygamy. Now in fact this bill has also proposed strict punishments such as imprisonments, heavy fines, and even disqualification from the government benefits such as public employment, government schemes. So all these disqualifications have been provided for by the Assam Prohibition of Polygamy Bill 2025 if anybody practices polygamy. Right, now in fact the bill excludes the scheduled tribes and 6th scheduled areas recognizing customary tribal practices. Now in fact in 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution there are 4 states: Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram. So these are the 4 states. However, Assam Prohibition of Polygamy Bill 2025, it is excluding the 6th scheduled areas in Assam, and at the same time it is also excluded the scheduled tribes as well. So that essentially means that if any of these 6th scheduled areas in Assam, so if there is a practice of the polygamy, that will be exempted from the provisions of the Prohibition of Polygamy Bill 2025, and in fact scheduled tribes are also exempted from the Polygamy Bill of 2025. So I hope it is clear for you. Now let's understand what are the key provisions of Assam's anti-polygamy bill of 2025. So let's try and understand the key provisions. So we all knew that polygamy is a practice of marrying more than once, right? So in fact this makes a criminal offense. under the anti-polygamy bill, if anybody practices polygamy, it is a criminal offense, because an imprisonment of up to 7 years and even 10 years if the offender conceals an existing marriage and he married again. So in that case, the imprisonment will go up to 10 years as well. So therefore, it has been mandating a stringent and stricter punishments and penalties for anybody who have been going for more than 2-3 marriages, right? So in fact, if anybody who is considered as a repeat offender, so to those repeat offenders, they are repeating the same offense again and again, so they will be eligible for the double punishment, and it will strengthen the deterrence provision as well, that it will create a deterrence effect that nobody can go for such crimes of marrying again and again, right? So it is another thing that if somebody is married and then divorced, and then they can go for the marriage again. So this is the legal process. But despite marrying once, not giving divorce to his or his first wife and going for the marriage again, so it amounts to the polygamy, right? So however, woman going for multiple marriages is polyandry, right? So in this case, it is talking about the polygamy. Now, as we have already discussed, that this Assam's Prohibition of Polygamy Bill 2025, it has provided exemptions to the scheduled tribes and also the 6th scheduled areas, right? So because under Article 342 of the Indian Constitution, so scheduled tribes, so they have some unique culture, so unique customs, cultural traditions, and because of that reason, Assam State's Prohibition of Polygamy Bill has excluded scheduled tribes from its ambit under Article 334 of the Constitution, and at the same time the 6th scheduled areas will also be excluded from the application of the Assam State Prohibition of Polygamy Bill of 2025. So that essentially means that in the 6th scheduled areas and even certain scheduled tribes, so multiple marriages are permitted by the customary law, right? So it is their custom. So some people, so scheduled tribes, people who are living in the 6th scheduled areas, they have a unique customs. So therefore, it has recognized those customs of the people. And the key objective of the Prohibition of Polygamy Bill is to protect a woman and also prevent exploitation of women. And at the same time, the objective is also to streamline the society and also bring or strengthen deterrence for those who are going for the multiple marriages as well, right? So in fact, the law will also be applicable for those people who belong to Assam but they have married outside the Assam as well. So therefore, an Assam resident enters into this polygamy marriage outside the state of Assam, so he will also be covered under the Prohibition of Polygamy Bill of 2025. So therefore, no loophole is existing through the cross-border marriages as well. So we can say that this is a comprehensive bill that is going to prohibit polygamy in the state of Assam to protect a woman with certain exceptions and also provide for a stringent fines, punishments for those who are going for the polygamy. Now let's understand the other aspect, the accountability measures, the wider effect or impact of the Prohibition of Polygamy Bill. So let's understand this. Now in fact, this bill will bring village heads, kojis, priests, parents, and even guardians, because they are the ones who actually involved in conducting marriages. So all these different groups of people are also eligible for punishment if they knowingly support or conceal any of these polygamous relations or polygamous marriages. So therefore, it again brought a deterrence effect here. And apart from that, the clerics who solemnize illegal marriages, so they may face fines of up to 1.5 lakh rupees as well. Now in fact, anybody who intentionally withholds information from the police, they may face a punishment or imprisonment of up to 2 years and even a fine of up to 1 lakh rupees as well. So therefore you can imagine how stringent these provisions are, and these provisions are specially aimed at prohibiting or preventing polygamy in the state of Assam. And apart from that, it has also introduced another very important provisions, so which prevent discourage polygamy, because those who are convicted under this law, this anti-polygamy law, then they will become ineligible for the government employment, and they will also be not eligible for the welfare schemes of the state government, and they are also not eligible for contesting elections as well if they are going for multiple marriages. Now, in fact, this bill has a compensation mechanism for the women. So those women who are harmed by these polygamous marriages, and at the same time, this anti-polygamy bill also empowers police to intervene before prohibited marriages taking place. So therefore, it empowers the police forces to prohibit the polygamy marriages, and at the same time it also support women who are into this polygamy marriages, because it has provided for the compensation mechanism as well, right? So however, there are several polygamous marriages which have already taken place. So far those polygamy marriages which already have taken place remain valid if conducted under the recognized personal or customary laws before the act come into force, because there is no retrospective effect of these laws on the earlier polygamy marriages. So this law will be applicable from the date it has got the assent from the governor of the state. So let's understand the constitutional and legal context of this Prohibition of Polygamy Act. Now, Article 342, right? So Article 342, it talks about it defines scheduled tribes. Now, in fact, scheduled tribes have certain customary practices, certain traditions, and in fact, their social life is different. So in order to recognize their cultural traditions, their customs, so this Prohibition of Polygamy Bill has provided an exemption to the scheduled tribes under Article 342 of the Constitution, and it has also provided an exemption to the 6th scheduled areas of the Indian Constitution in the state of Assam. Right? So in fact, the 6th scheduled areas include Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram. So these are the 4 6th scheduled areas. However, in this case, the Prohibition of Polygamy Bill will be applicable for the state of Assam only, because it is a state specific legislation, right? So however, if you look at the polygamy, so polygamy varies across personal laws. Now, Hindu Marriage Act 1955, it prohibits polygamy, right? So no person should go for more than one marriage according to Hindu Marriage Act of 1955. But Muslim personal law has allowed the practice of polygamy, so they can go for marriages of more than 2 as well. However, there are some customary practices for the tribal communities, and those customary practices also allow the practice of polygamy as well. So therefore, we can say that the polygamy laws in India vary across the country. Now, however, criminalizing marriage related offenses, for example, polygamy is a marriage related offense. So criminalizing marriage related offenses falls under the state list of the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. Now, 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution deals with what? It deals with the division of subjects into central list, state list and concurrent list. So therefore, since it falls under the state list, Assam has the power to enact such a legislation. However, so if anybody who is accused, who is convicted of the Anti-Polygamy Act, anti-polygamy law, so they will be disqualified from the government schemes, and they will be disqualified from contesting elections, and they are also not eligible to get the government jobs as well. So this is what Assam State Prohibition of Polygamy Bill 2025 talks about, and its provisions as well. So I hope it is clear and you have understood this as well. So let's understand another very important topic, which is Trump's Ukraine peace plan. Now, in fact, this is a detailed and a comprehensive editorial which has been given in the Indian Express newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view, this is very important for General Studies paper 2. So let's understand what is Trump's Ukraine peace plan. So what are the key proposals that Trump has introduced, and how it is going to affect Ukraine and Europe, and how it is going to affect Russia, and what stakes that India has in this peace plan. So let's understand all these factors in detail. Now, in fact, so Trump has proposed a Ukraine peace plan, but this Ukraine's peace plan of Trump is dubbed as controversial peace plan. So we will understand why it is a controversial peace plan. So the first reason is that there is a major shift in US-Russia relations by reintegrating Moscow into the Western order, right? So there is a scope that Moscow will be reintegrated into the Western order. That is what it has been proposing. So in fact, this has unsettled Europe, Ukraine, and even parts of US establishment, because within US also there are some groups, some establishments, they actually don't like Ukraine's peace plan of Trump, right? Because it has ceded the concessions that Russia has been asking for, and at the same time it may threaten the territorial integrity of the Europe as well. And in fact, it also aimed at improving US relations with Russia. So therefore, this has unsettled Europe, Ukraine, and even the US establishment, while raising significant geopolitical implications for India as well. So we'll be understanding what geopolitical implications this Ukraine peace plan will have on India, right? So let's first understand what is this Ukraine's peace proposal of Trump. Right, so what he has proposed. Now, in fact, so it has been described as a bold framework on the part of Trump. And in fact, this framework also aimed at reconciliation of US and Russia rivalry. So we all knew from the end of the Second World War, the disintegration of the Soviet Union. So throughout this Cold War, so there is an ideological battle between US and Russia, right? So however, this is dubbed as a bold framework on the part of US President Donald Trump, and he wanted to reconcile US Russia relations. So therefore, it could be a challenging 2 decades of entrenched hostility between US and Russia. First thing. The second thing is that it has a core offer, right? So his 28-point proposal, right? So his 28-point proposal, it mirrors key Russian demands, right? So because Russia has already have important territorial gains throughout the eastern Ukraine, right? So throughout eastern Ukraine, it has already has the important territorial gains. But this framework of US has actually been reflecting Russian demands. So Russia wanted what? It has wanted territorial concessions, right? So it has clearly wanted territorial concessions in Eastern Europe. So these are the areas which are already under the control of Russia. And territorial concessions with respect to Crimea as well, because in 2014, Russia has occupied Crimea, right? And at the same time, Russia also wanted NATO neutrality with respect to Ukraine. So NATO should not interfere and involve in the matters of Ukraine. NATO should be neutral. And at the same time, NATO should limit its military outreach to Ukraine, and this is what Russia wanted. However, this 28-point peace plan of Trump has been reflecting or mirroring Russian demands, such as the key and important demands like this. And apart from that, the strategic objective of coming up with this framework is, reintegration of Russia into the global economy, possibly the G7, and also reducing Moscow's dependence on China. Right, so it wanted to reduce Moscow's dependence on China. So however, we need to talk about the high stakes diplomacy. So if we talk about the high stakes diplomacy, Trump aims to reset relations despite Washington's bipartisan suspicion towards Moscow, right? So therefore, this is also a high stake, a diplomacy that is involved here, right? So apart from that, we have to understand the other factors as well, because there is some sort of different groups. So these different groups have different ideas with respect to Trump's peace plan, right? So if we talk about that, while MAGA groups, they push for disengagement from European conflicts. So these MAGA groups are, they are aligned with Trump. So they wanted to make America great again, right? So make America great again. So they push for disengagement from European conflicts, right? And at the same time, US so they push for US establishment views Trump's approach as an appeasement, right? So they actually view this as an appeasement on the part of Trump, right? So at the same time, so we have to understand key geopolitical concepts and as well as the international frameworks as well. Now in this context, let's understand the G7. So before G7 was existing, there was another grouping called G8. So in G8 grouping, Russia is also member. However, so in 2014, Russia has captured Crimea, right? So since Russia has captured Crimea in the year 2014, so Russia has been expelled from this G8 grouping. So then it has become G7 grouping. So G7 grouping is a grouping of all industrialized and developed countries. So there are 7 industrialized developed countries. However, so some scholars also view that Trump's peace proposals also aimed at bringing Russia again into the G7 grouping and making it a G8 grouping. So therefore, Russia will be delinked from its excessive reliance on China. So this is the first aspect. So if we talk about the NATO, so NATO is a collective defense alliance. We all knew about that, right? So this is a Western collective defense alliance. So Ukraine seeks membership and strongly opposed by Russia. Ukraine also wanted to become a member of NATO, but Russia has been strongly opposing Ukraine's membership into NATO grouping. And in fact, this peace proposals also include NATO's neutrality with respect to Kyiv, NATO's limited military involvement in Ukraine. So however, as I have already told you that in the year 2014, Russia has encroached or annexed Crimea. So this is known as unilateral takeover of Crimea by Russia. So this has been condemned under the international law and considered a violation of customary international law, right? So this is considered as a violation of the customary international law. Now in this context, if you look at the Eurasian geopolitics, so there has been a competition among the major powers within the Eurasian geopolitics, right? So because most of these major powers, they don't want the domination by any one state or a coalition on them. So therefore, this is another very important factor in this context. So, however, India always advocates for the strategic autonomy, right? So, in fact, if we talk about the strategic autonomy as an approach, it is in line with the independent decision making, right? So, it is an independent decision making without alignment with the power blocks, and this is stemmed from the name alliance, non-alignment movement. However, we can also say that it is inspired from the NAM alliance. Now, apart from that, if you look at the Sino-Russian axis, so the Sino-Russian axis, so for example, in recent times, there has been a deepening of strategic military and economic partnership challenging Western influence. And in fact, US sanctions laws include countering American adversaries through Sanctions Act affecting countries which are engaged in Russia. However, India has procured S-400 missile defense systems. So despite India's procurement of S-400 missile defense system, India's engagement with Russia, so US has not imposed sanctions under this CAATSA framework. So, however, the world has been moving towards a multipolar world. So, there are multiple centers of power, not a bipolar or a unipolar world order. So, however, India also preferred a multipolar world order at this context. So, let's understand impact of Ukraine's peace plan of Trump on Europe and Ukraine's security calculus. So let's understand this. Now, if you look at the European concerns, the plan has rattled Europe because Europe has concerns with respect to Russia, right? So therefore, proposing such a plan by Trump and Trump also agreeing to the concessions or demands of Russia, so therefore all these factors have rattled Europe. So in fact, Europe also struggles to manage the vacuum created by earlier US hesitations over Ukraine's military aid. Now, in fact, for Europe collectively, Ukraine is very important. Ukraine is like a buffer for the rest of the Europe, right? So apart from that, if you look at, Ukraine has also been facing a lot of pressure from US to accept the concessions that Russia has been demanding. However, the problem here is that if Ukraine accepts those concessions of Russia, it may undermine the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the long-term guarantees that Ukraine has been asking from Russia, and that is the key aspect here. However, so if there is a prolonged conflict, so that has deepened military, economic, and humanitarian strains on Ukraine, right? So apart from that, any settlement between this Russia and Ukraine, West and East, resolving the disagreements which are existed on borders, NATO membership, and US European Union security assurances. Right? So therefore any settlement requires all these things because Ukraine wanted NATO membership and US EU security assurances are also very important, and there is a need to resolve these disagreements on the border areas. However, despite the talks, bridging gaps between Ukrainian aspirations and Russian demands remain extremely difficult. So let's understand now another important dimension of it. So Russia's position, what exactly is Russia's position? And it's deepening China's alignment because it has been strengthening its relations with Russia, China, and ever since Cold War there has been a strengthening of ties between Russia and China, right? Because Russia has been isolated after the annexation of Crimea, because it was expelled from the G8 grouping and G8 grouping became a G7 grouping. And apart from that, Russia's invasion of Ukraine in the year 2022, so it has further isolated Russia, so economically and politically. So that is the reason that Russia has moved closer to China, right? So in fact, China is main economic partner of Russia, and it is the top energy customer and technology supplier and even the geopolitical backer as well. And that's the reason that Russia has been strengthening its relations with China. So this is a one factor. The factor is isolation of Russia. The second factor is, so there are a lot of advantages that Russia has achieved so far from the 2022 invasion. However, Russia has been facing economic stress, sanctions, and even long-term isolation as well. Right, so this is another strategic vulnerability that Russia has been facing. However, what are the assumptions of Moscow? So Moscow's assumptions are, time favors Russia. So expecting that Ukraine's position to weaken and Western unity to erode over a period of time. So this may result in a favorable situation for Russia to demand better terms in case of any such agreement. This is what Russia has been believed in, and Russia has been even prolonging this war as well. So however, Moscow seeks recognition because as an independent power, Moscow, it wanted to be recognized or viewed as an independent power, not as a junior partner in China-centric order. And even limited rapprochement with the West would strengthen Russia's strategic choices as well. So that's why it has started strengthening its relations with China. So let's understand what are the strategic stakes in a potential US-Russia reset. So what stakes that India is actually having in this reset? Because understand that India is always trying to balance between Russia and US. Because we have a very good relations with Russia, and at the same time we also wanted to maintain a strong and friendly relations with the West as well, US and Europe. So therefore, if you look at India, so India viewed this US-Russia hostility as a permanent. So India always viewed this as a temporary issue between US and Russia, and it will be settled. Right? So in fact, recalling US-Soviet alliances earlier and even Russia's post-Cold War westward tilt. So this is how India viewed at Russia-US, hostility as a temporary thing. So however, India is concerned with respect to the Sino-American duopoly, because G2 actually means bringing together US and China. And however, India don't want that just G2 should be formed. Right? So however, India may be against G2, but India is not against US-Russia arrangement, because this is going to benefit India in multiple ways. So apart from that, so India is also against a strong Sino-Russian partnership. So India don't want this strong Sino-Russian partnership because it would further complicates India's security environment in the region, beyond the region, especially the line of actual control, and this is another dimension. So however, if US and Russia have come together, so they may create a room for India to maintain good relations with the US and Russia without being caught in a zero-sum rivalries. And in fact, it may strengthen the national power, preserve strategic autonomy, and even avoiding ideological biases in great power disputes as well. So these are the India's priorities. Right? So however, we have also understood the stakes with respect to India in this Ukraine's peace plan of Trump as well. Right? So let's understand another very important topic is draft seats bill, and this has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view, this is very important for General Studies paper 3. Right? So understand that Union Agriculture Ministry has introduced this draft seed bill for the public comments. Right? So it will be introduced for the public comments. Now in fact, in India, if we talk about the seeds, quality and affordable seeds are very, very important, because India is predominantly an agriculture based economy, because around 48 to 50% of India's population have been dependent on agriculture. First thing. Second thing is that doubling farmers' income is also very important, right? So if we wanted to double farmers' income, it is important to increase agricultural productivity. So however, to increase agricultural productivity, there is a need for the quality seeds, first thing. And apart from having quality seeds, farmers have certain rights, right? So farmers have certain rights with respect to the seeds. So therefore there is a need to recognize the rights of the farmers. Second thing. The third thing is to accommodate technology, right? So there is also a need to accommodate technology in the development of new seed varieties, right? So at the same time, protect innovation protect innovation in seed technology, so which is also in line with the intellectual property rights. So therefore balancing these two with the farmers rights, and apart from that ensuring the availability of quality seeds. And the fourth factor is stringent punishments for those who have involved in selling the fake seeds, malicious seeds, counterfeit seeds, so that it will be a strong deterrent on those who are selling, manufacturing these malicious and counterfeit seeds, to protect the farmers' rights. So these are all the objectives with which the seeds bill has been brought by the union government, and this is a draft seeds bill and it has not been yet introduced into the parliament. However, in India we have a Seeds Act, right? So we have a Seeds Act of 1966, and we also have the Seeds Order 1983, Seeds Control Order 1983, and Seeds Act of 1966. However, the problem with these two provisions are they are outdated, and there is a need for reforms to accommodate the changing technology in the seed production, seed development, to introduce stringent provision, protect farmers' rights, and also protect the intellectual property rights. So there is a need to reform both these outdated legislations, and that is the objective with which this draft seeds bill has been introduced for the public comments. So once it has got all the public comments, it will be introduced in the parliament, then also it will be passed, right? So I hope you have understood this draft seeds bill and its objective. So let's discuss another very important topic. It talks about the custodial torture and the CCTV compliance, because earlier the Supreme Court has ordered to install CCTV cameras in all the police stations, which the direction is aimed at preventing the custodial torture and brutality of the police. Now in this context, this topic has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view, this is important for General Studies paper 2. So let's discuss what is this aspect. The context is that the Supreme Court's panel has released a comprehensive report on prison reforms. So there is a need for a comprehensive reform on prison reforms, right? So revealing the deep systematic gaps in the investigation of the custodial deaths. Now what are the major highlights in this matter? So the major highlights is that there has been a severe delay in the forensic examination, because there is existing a huge vacancies of staff. So this report has highlighted around 52% of vacancy of staff in the state forensic labs, and it has been leading to severe delays in the forensic examination. So first thing, right? So second thing is that as a result, 1,237 inquiries into the custodial deaths remained pending in various district courts for over a year since 2023, and this is a very serious issue that has been highlighted by this comprehensive report. The second thing is that so there are several issues in the prison administration as well, right? Because there are prison manuals how the administration should be carried out in these prisons. So they refer to prison work related to conservancy and sanitation as menial or work of degrading character, because it may perpetuate the hierarchical view of labor. Now, apart from that, if we talk about the disparity in payments, there has been a disparity of payments because there are some minimum wages, but all prisons are not giving a fair wages to the prisoners who are working. For example, several states pay prisoners much less than the prescribed minimum wages for their labor. For example, here Mizoram pays just 20 rupees, but Karnataka pays 524 rupees for the prisoners. So there is a disparity in the payments as well, and this is what the comprehensive report on prison reforms has identified. So however, let's understand the custodial deaths in India, right? So there are custodial deaths. Now there are some data also. This data has been provided by National Human Rights Commission. So this data has highlighted from 2016 to 2022. So in India, 11,650 custodial deaths were reported. This is a very high number of custodial deaths reported as per the National Human Rights Commission. Now, in fact, Uttar Pradesh has topped the list of states with respect to custodial deaths because Uttar Pradesh has itself recorded 2,630 custodial deaths. However, now the 2023 analysis of National Human Rights Commission and the other government data has revealed that between 2017 and 2022, only 345 magisterial inquiries were ordered across the nation into custodial deaths, and it has resulted in just 123 arrests alone. However, if you look at the vulnerable groups, National Human Rights Commission. So National Human Rights Commission data reveals that 71% of custodial deaths between 1996 and 2018 has involved detainees from poor and vulnerable backgrounds. So, however, let's understand what are the challenges in curbing custodial deaths. So, in fact, India has not ratified UN Convention Against Torture of 1997. If India has ratified, India may have brought a suitable legislation that may prevent the custodial deaths, torture. More professionalism can be expected from the police forces. And apart from that, there is an absence of a national level anti-torture framework in India. And apart from that, lengthening judicial proceedings, judicial delays, and delays in conducting the forensic tests, and even the tremendous pressure on police to detect cases wherever there is a surge in crime and particularly heinous crimes. So all these factors have led to the increasing custodial deaths, and you can also see this data on the custodial deaths as well. So this is what the Supreme Court's findings are in with respect to the custodial deaths. So I hope you have understood this, and thank you so much. That's all for today.